But Lynette and I have had a tremendous privilege of getting to know Bonnie. She was, for those of you who were at Pure Life Women's Conference last year in New York City, she was a speaker there, and she shared a little bit of her story. And we've been so struck by who she is as a person, her character, her life story, her dependence on God, her brand new book called How Strong Women Pray. And I had the privilege of reading this past week, and I want to just say what an amazing book for men as well. It's a shame that women have to so often lead the charge in prayer, and thank God for this book, really. It's just so inspirational. There's a lot of ways that when you get a copy of this book, a lot of ways that you can use this book, because so many people in this book are people who are very well respected, very well known people, even people that I didn't even know they prayed. And I thought, wow, that's amazing. So a lot of great surprises in here. But we're going to go to a video and let the video do the primary introduction of Bonnie St. John.
She began life with a disadvantage, one that would have overwhelmed most of us, but Bonnie St. John took that disadvantage and made it work for her and those she has inspired. NBC's Mike Betcher has her story.
Those who know her will tell you if life itself is a contest, then Bonnie St. John is on her way to winning. Not because she's fast, but because she's quick to get up after a fall. And if you start life with one leg, not two, you better know how to get up.
So I don't worry so much about my handicap. I worry about getting in shape and practicing, because anybody can always get better. Okay, on your mark.
She learned that the hard way back in 1984, when Bonnie and her athletic trainer thought she was the best woman amputee skier in the Innsbruck, Austria Paralympics.
She was one hell of an athlete.
However, she slipped and fell and got up and won the bronze. But she could have won the gold. First place went to a competitor who had also fallen.
So I realized that winners aren't just people who never make mistakes. They're people who get up, and gold medal winners are the people who can get up the fastest.
In the years that follow the Paralympics, Bonnie has continued to perform at her personal best. In 1986, she graduated from Harvard with highest honors. That same year, she went on to Oxford on a Rhodes Scholarship. In 1993, she was appointed by the Clinton administration to a senior management position at the National Economic Council. And for the past 5 years, her life story has served to inspire audiences throughout the country. In addition to the speeches she gives, Bonnie makes a special point to reach out to disabled children and help them realize their own potential.
Bonnie grew up here in San Diego, and she was a determined young girl. Her folks didn't have a lot of money, so she worked odd jobs. The kids at school made fun of her, but still she excelled in her studies. All the time there was something inside of her that drove her to move on and move up. Motivating and inspiring others is now her full-time job. She has a lifetime of qualification.
I've been doing the laser walk now for
Bonnie was born with what became a shrunken leg. At age 5, she was told her leg had to be amputated and replaced with a prosthesis. Early on, she had to make the choice, stay down or get up.
The doctor told me he was going to cut off my leg. And I said, well, can I wear any color shoes that I want? And will both my feet be on the floor even? And he said, yes. And I said, sure, great, cut it off.
Her mother remembers a particular parent-teachers conference.
I said to the teacher, what's the matter? And the teacher said, she falls down all the time. I said, so? She gets up. And that's been the story of Bonnie's life. She gets up.
I think my life is proof that you can accomplish things. You can go beyond your limits.
There are roadblocks. There are difficulties along the way, flat tires.
You have to be able to go over, around, and under, and through.
And in Bonnie's case, that means simultaneously caring for her family, writing books, and giving a full schedule of inspirational speeches.
But I've found a way to have not everything, but to have a complete life.
Bonnie St. John can't help but smile. She turned a loss into a gain for herself and many others. Mike Betcher, NBC News.
That was great. I'll take this one right here. Let's welcome Bonnie St. John. An overcomer. We love it.
When you look at me, you see the power of God to love and to heal. You see all the achievements that I made on the television show on NBC Nightly News, but to really understand the power of God in my life, we have to go back to where I started. I didn't start out with Olympic medals around my neck. I didn't start out with degrees from Harvard and Oxford and a Rhodes Scholarship. I started out a very scared child. When I think about how Jesus did miracles of healing, and he would say to people, if the Father can do that for your body, think of what he can do for your soul. And my story is so much that story. I started out with a birth defect. The growth was stunted in my leg. So when I was little, I always had a brace that I was dragging around on my leg. If they hadn't amputated my foot, my foot would have been sticking out where my knee is by now because my leg just didn't grow. So I was in and out of hospitals and surgeries. But also at the same time, from the age of 2 to the age of 7, I was being abused by my stepfather, sexually abused. My father, my real father, had left before I was born. My mother was a young, single mom by herself, pregnant with 2 kids and no parents. Her own mother had passed. Her father was long gone. When I think about my mother and the situation where we started, I don't know how she coped. It's funny. When I wrote the book, How Strong Women Pray, my mother said, "You have to interview me." And when your mother says you have to interview her. So I interviewed my mother, and she told me some powerful stories about how she coped through prayer. And they were stories I had never heard until I interviewed her for the book. And I think that's an important message out of the book, is that it's so important for us to have conversations about prayer and not to wait until I'm in my 40s to have that conversation with my mother. Have you really taken the time to tell your children about the difficult times when you got through it with prayer? She told me a story of being a teenager, and her parents were gone, and she was on her own and struggling to stay out of trouble, to not let boys into the house when her parents were gone, and how God gave her the strength to do that. So my mother was coping with a lot when I was little. And one of the things when I look back and I see the hand of God was that the Shriners Hospital, a Shriner was a teacher at my school, and he saw me dragging my brace around, and he said, "We can help you." And the Shriners Hospital stepped up and took care of all my surgeries. I had 4 or 5 surgeries. I had different sized legs as I was growing up. And if my mother had to cope with insurance companies, I think I would have had a much more difficult road. And if we had been coping with insurance companies that didn't pay and in and out of hospitals, would I have been able to start ski racing? I don't think so. So when I look at that, I didn't see that for so long. But when I wrote the book, I looked back, and that was one of the things I saw as the hand of God at work. How many things, how often are we praying for help that we need now and saying, "God, where are you?" But have we really looked back? Have you really looked back over your life and appreciated all the times when he's been there? And we forget. And we forget. And when I look back and I see how much he's done for me, it gives me so much hope for the future. To remember, he's been there. Yep, he's always been there. Yes. And so I can handle what's on my plate now. The hardest thing I ever had to go through was the healing from the abuse in my childhood. And when my daughter's here in the front row, Darcy, She's 13 now, but when she was 2 and 3, it just brought up the memories of my own childhood. And I thought that I could run away from it. I thought that I could stuff it down and put it behind me. I thought that I didn't need God. But when I had to deal with that, it was bigger than what I could handle. I had tried to do a lot of things in my life on my own. I had been a ski racer. I had worked in the White House. I had had the Rhodes Scholarship, met Nelson Mandela on the White House lawn. You know, I had done a lot of things, and I thought that I could handle it on my own. But when it came to healing the emotional pain in my life, I found out I couldn't do it by myself. There was a day, I talk about this in the book, I was in so much pain. I was going to give a speech in Trinidad, and I was in the hotel room. And when I was alone in a hotel room was where I could break down and fall apart and cry. And often I was giving a lot of speeches at that time. Often I would cry in a hotel room and then get up and put on my makeup and go give a motivational speech. But this day, this particular day, I was in so much emotional pain, I couldn't get off the bed. I could not move. I couldn't move. And I cried out the simplest prayer in the world, God, help me.
That's a great prayer. It's a great prayer. You know, I read that in your book, and one of the things that struck me about that is just the simplicity of prayer and how it doesn't have to be elaborate. You don't even have to have the right words. But it was like at that moment, God really saw your desperate prayer, and he answered that prayer.
And I just think it's so important to say, healing is hard. Healing emotionally is hard. And that's why I started with a quote. Jesus says, if I can do this for your body, just think of what I can do for your soul. Mm-hmm. And it's so important to remember. I mean, I'm betting there's probably nobody here who hasn't had to do some kind of emotional healing in their lives. And I can say I've won Olympic medals, I've had degrees, but the hardest thing I've ever had to do is to heal. So if you're going through that, to reach out and let God help. Let this community help you and support you so that you can get through it in one piece. I am only standing up. I am only standing here before you through the grace of God because I had that help. Absolutely. Because I had the ability to pray. And what I talk about in the book is learning to pray. Because we can pray that simple prayer, but then I went on and I learned how to form a daily prayer, and it changes over time, it evolves. So to keep enriching and to keep learning, to never stop learning how to pray and how to strengthen that bond and to be able to get strength from God. When I pitched the book, the idea to publish How Strong Women Pray, there were a lot of people who thought it was a great idea because they thought it was an oxymoron. You know, there's a lot of people in New York City in the publishing business who say, strong women pray? Question mark? I thought only weak women prayed.
Come on.
And what they don't understand is that in order to be a strong woman, in order to get that strength, in order to be a strong man, we pray. And so to continue strengthening that, to see how other strong women pray, to learn, to get ideas, to say, oh, I could try that. Oh, I could try that. The process of writing the book definitely strengthened my prayer life.
How have you seen this book inspire people, for example, those who maybe think that's an oxymoron? How have you seen the book has had great reviews and great testimonials as well? It was wonderful, and it got on the Today Show. It was launched on the first day on the Today Show, which I was so happy that the Today Show would do prayer. I was like, yeah, hallelujah, God. Good
That's
work.
great.
And that's been the power of this book because it has Maya Angelou and Edie Falco and Barbara Bush, and it has these
By the way, let me go back just in case these folks. Edie Falco has a lead role in The Sopranos. Now, how I know that, you know, the Lord just gave me that through a word of knowledge, but
not that
anyway.
you've ever watched the show.
Right.
But as you said, there's a lot of unexpected people in there, and that was part of the idea, was to find women who were out there in the news, prominent women that we look up to, that we say, oh, they've achieved something, they're a CEO of a company, they've done something, but you know what? They pray, and that's how they do that. And it's a powerful book to give to people who've turned away from the church or who are not excited about God anymore. And a lot of people, they will read it because of the names that are in there. They'll say, oh, okay, you know. And because it's it's just stories about their life. It's not telling them you have to do it this way or you have to do it that way. So a lot of people have been able to take it in. And so it's a great tool to give
Absolutely.
to people who you would like to invite in. It's a very accessible thing. God, it's amazing. It was an idea that I got while I was praying, and I felt like I don't know anything about prayer books. You know, I'm not an expert on this. I never went to seminary, but God had a great idea.
Unnecessary.
God had a great idea when He did that book because it is so accessible to people.
Bonnie, one of the common strands here would be the trials that people face and how trials. Wouldn't you say that your view of trials maybe have shifted as you look back and analyze your life? This book could also be called The Sovereignty of God over the life of Bonnie St. John.
And 27 other people.
And 27 others. And really, each of you could have your own book on prayer. And I think the older you get, you look back in the very moments that are defining your life as horrendous trials. And you share in detail your childhood, which was you were robbed of a childhood. But in looking back, I think all of us can one day come to this place in seeing how trials actually became a gift to cause us to be more dependent on God. And I know in my own life, unfortunately, my prayer life would probably be less if it wasn't for the gift of the trials that come. And I hate to say it that way because we like to see ourselves, oh, I am the friend of God, I am the friend of God, and God and I have this amazing relationship. But too often, I think in all of our lives, we drift from God. The natural proclivity is to drift away from God, but trials then cause our faith to grow and our prayer life to grow as well.
That's so true.
What are your thoughts about that, just the gift of the trials that you faced?
In my life, one of the hardest things, I think, because of my childhood, my sense of love was so twisted. Mm-hmm. And even my self-esteem, the way I treated myself, I didn't care for myself. And so to go back and heal, I had to learn love. And you know, from the age of 2 to 7 is when your identity is being formed. When you think about a child, that's when they're understanding who they are and what the world is. And so mine was so twisted. Mm-hmm. To go back and try to relearn what love is. I think in a way the gift is I have to depend on God to understand what love is.
That's it.
I can't fall back on my old habits or the way my family acted, or I can't fall back on my own knowledge. I have to go back and get filled up from God to understand what love is.
Well, that's huge right there. And I think so many of us would have a tendency to maybe project on our image of God based upon a bad family situation. And what you're saying is that by faith you've had to cross over that bridge and accept God by faith as a loving, good, caring, wonderful Heavenly Father, never to mistreat you like that.
And to give me the example of what it feels like inside so that I can love my daughter and not have it be shaped by what happened to me, but to love her from God's love, and to be in loving relationships with my family and with my friends in a way that is of God. And so I have to constantly go back to the source to figure that out. Even the most basic things that you might take for granted, I have to go back to the source to figure out.
There's a scripture that says, this is the victory that has overcome the world, even our faith. And your faith has just brought you above. This is a world-class example of what it means to be an overcomer. And what a great example. So tomorrow morning, if I feel sorry for myself, I'm going to remember this moment. That here is an African-American woman from San Diego. San Diego's hot. There are no ski slopes in San Diego. All right? Grew up on the wrong side of the track, being abused in the most horrendous way, and then having the leg issue, and all of a sudden one day you find a ski slope. This is, talk about an oxymoron. I mean, I don't know which is the greater miracle. And I said this to you, we can cut up like this because we're friends now. But what is the greater miracle? Being an Olympic winner with all these medals, you know, that you have, or is it being an African-American woman from San Diego finding a ski slope? I mean, which is greater?
Actually, the really challenging thing was to find the money to go skiing. You know what I mean? We had a month left at the end of the money. We didn't have money left at the end of the month. We had months left at the end of the money.
We understand. That's common to mankind, that one. Well, I love the first time you went skiing, and we've just talked about your overcoming, which is amazing. And that's why Lynette and I just so admire you and love you. You can't get around someone like this and just not appreciate life at a higher value and overcome just the taking for granted of so many blessings that we have. You know, thank God I have 2 good legs, you know, the little blessings. But if I didn't, I can still have 1 good leg in the joy of the Lord, you know. So and that's what Bonnie has showed us. But let's talk just for a couple more minutes about some of your achievements, because the very first time you went skiing, you had an image through a flyer of someone who was handicapped and they were a skier. You had that image locked away from your childhood.
My mother had given me a brochure. She came home from work one day and handed me a brochure with a picture of an amputee on a ski. And when you think about that, it's amazing that she gave it to me, because she could have picked it up and thought, you know, we don't have money for lift tickets and condos, and thrown it out, you know, or thought, we're in San Diego, let's be realistic, there's no snow here, or we're black, we don't even like cold weather, right?
There you have it. Okay. You can say that. I can't say that, but you can say that.
I have to say it's not true. I'm not saying it's true. It's right up there with we don't golf, right?
Well, now, if you're going to start going that direction, last I checked, the finest rapper in the world is white. So, you know, so it kind of works both ways. All right.
But the point is it's about possibilities. It's about not seeing limitations, whether you're a white rapper or whether you're a black golfer.
I'm with you.
But it's not about limitations. It's about seeing possibilities. And she brought home that brochure and gave it to me. And, you know, I think when I think about my mother and how much she struggled, it's so easy when you're struggling to be afraid and say, I don't want to get my kids' hopes up because I don't want to disappoint them. Mm-hmm. That's not of God.
Absolutely.
That's not of God. Not. But to raise our child's expectations, because they are a child of God, and anything is possible for them.
So, Bonnie, you had to find the right equipment, which you can't just find that anywhere. And that was a major challenge, a month-long search.
A friend of mine invited me to go skiing, Barbara Warmath, and I said yes because I'd seen the picture. And when you say yes to a great challenge, you immediately have a lot of problems that you didn't have before, right? You do. And that's why often we do not say yes, and we do not tackle great things because we don't want those problems, you know? So I said yes to go skiing. And I didn't have the special equipment that I needed, the poles with the little outriggers. I didn't even have winter clothes, never mind ski clothes. And I knew I needed a little spending money to go to this rich, expensive place and go ski. So those were all obstacles. Right. And you were referring to the story I told you. It took me 30 days to find the equipment. My mother gave me the yellow pages and said, here, call a sporting goods store, you know, because my mother didn't have time to sit down and do it for me. You know what I mean? So she just gave me, and I looked up a sporting goods store, and I called, and they said, never heard of it. And I called the next one, and they said, no, don't know where they have those, you know. And I went all the way through. None of the sporting goods stores carried equipment for amputees. And so I thought, well, I'll call the ski area. And they called the ski area, and they said, well, we've seen those one-legged skiers, but we don't know where they get their equipment. And so I tried and I tried and I asked, and after 30 days of getting no, and 30 days is a long time when you're 15, I finally had somebody say, oh, I know a club of amputees that skis. And the president of that club lent me his outriggers for the first time. And then I got clothes from the Salvation Army, and, you know, I always had to scrounge to make it work.
Now, when you went your first skiing, I also remember reading that you had to actually remove your prosthesis, your leg.
Oh, yeah, I ski without my leg. I always leave my leg at the bottom of the hill.
Yeah, so that was interesting to me. It's like, here people are skiing down, and they say, whoa, somebody lost something.
I got to say this, though. When you go to an event where all the disabled people are skiing together, like a big national event, everybody leaves you leave your arms, your legs, your wheelchair. And it looks like Lourdes, because it looks like everybody's been healed and gone.
Oh, that's great. So you caught on pretty quickly, and then I also love the story that Brian Williams was telling, that actually you could have won the gold medal because you were the fastest skier, but it really wasn't about how fast you were skiing. This is a parable of life. It was how quickly do you get up when you fall.
You want me to tell that story?
I would love that. You can do it better than me. It's really your story, but it's a parable of life, that particular one.
I went to the Olympics in 1984, and I was the third-ranked one-legged skier in the U.S. at that time. And I had trained on glaciers for 2 summers. I had waited tables, traveled all over, found sponsors, found the National Brotherhood of Skiers to sponsor me, which we do like cold weather. It's the National Black Ski Club.
I tell you, Pastor George, you learn one every time. Skiing Brothers, I told you.
Skiing Brothers.
Get you out
You
there.
got to look it up. Look it up. 33 members of the National Brotherhood of Skiers came to cheer me on in Innsbruck, Austria. So there was this huge crowd of black people screaming on the hill in Europe. It scared people. They said, "Bonnie, you have a really big family." I said, "Yes, I do." So I went out there. I was the third-ranked member of the team. My mother had never seen me ski before. They didn't hold races in San Diego where she lived, so we got her out to the Olympics. It was the first time she was ever seeing me ski race. I came down the first run of the slalom, and when they posted the times, my time was in first place. Nobody expected me to beat my own team members, never mind to be first in the world, so it was an upset. But I had trained harder. I had trained all summer. I trained with 2-legged skiers, and there I was, #1 in the world. My mother started jumping up and down and screaming. My brother knocked her over and rolled her in the snow to cool her off. But it takes 2 runs combined time to win a medal. So I went back up to the top to wait my turn. And while I'm waiting, and a couple of other women go down, I hear that there's a dangerous spot on the course, and women are crashing. So I'm thinking, no heroics, nothing crazy. I just need to stand up, and I can win the gold medal. So I get in the starting gate, and the race official counts down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and I break the timing wand. I'm hitting the red and the blue poles. I'm going down. I get to where I can see the finish line, and I think, I've made it. I'm going to win. And what happens when you think you've made it and all your problems are over? You hit the ice. I hit the ice. I tried to dig in, and I tried to hold on to my edge, but I couldn't do it, and wham, I was on my rear end in the snow. I went from #1 in the world to falling down. In that moment when you're down and you mess up and the whole world is watching, don't you just want to give up? I just wanted to crawl away to not have to face my mother, my teammates, my sponsors. But my training, my reflex was always to get up. So I got my equipment, I got over the finish line, and when the times came in, I was still in 3rd place. I went on to win 3rd place in the giant slalom race, and then 7th place in the downhill later. So I was awarded the silver medal that I'm wearing for overall 2nd place. So I was 2nd place. I was the 2nd fastest woman in the world, and the first African American to win a medal in Winter Olympics.
Astounding.
But it wouldn't have happened if I hadn't gotten up and gotten over the finish line. And I was thinking about it later, and I realized the woman who won the gold in that race had also fallen. So I was fastest when everybody was standing. I was the best slalom skier on one leg. But then we did the second run, everybody fell down. She didn't beat me by skiing faster. She beat me by getting up faster. She beat me by getting up faster. So I realized that people fall down. We all get knocked down in life, whether it's your work, your family, your personal life, your emotions, your physical. We get knocked down. But to win, you get up and finish. But sometimes the gold medal winner is just the person who got up the fastest. And that's why prayer is so important, and that's why this community is so important, because we will get knocked down. But to get up a little faster and get over the finish line, I need God. I need prayer.
We all do. Thank you. Thank you. Wonderful. That's right. What an inspiration, Bonnie. So much of your life just breaks down hindrances and barriers. You and I have the grace to, we cut up and joke around with the racial barriers or the stereotypes or the mindsets, and then there's the limitations physically, those limitations emotionally, what you've had to overcome there, probably the greatest challenge of them all. The fight to excel, Harvard, Rhodes Scholarship rather, those things. And I just want to say thank you and pray that your example would cause every person in this room today to be more dependent on God and less dependent on self. Thank you. Outstanding.